Have you ever seen the rain coming down on a sunny day? Hoping that it rains so fast and heavy to wash that pain away. Try to forget about all the problems as I hold my faith. And you're hoping for the best, but I guess it's just the same today. Yeah, sweet reggae music makes me feel alright. It's like the rhythm taking me higher while it's holding me tight. Yeah. My cup is filled with love at the end of the night. Music, you just turned on my lights. I wanna know, have you ever seen the rain? Have you ever? I wanna know, have you ever seen? Have you ever coming down on a sunny day? I wanna know, have you ever seen the rain? Have you ever seen the rain? I wanna know, have you ever seen the rain? Yeah, coming down on a sunny day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 8-part inner wellness series, part 7. It's a bittersweet. We only got 2 parts left, but part 7. What is your boundary? So one of my favorite ones, and then we do have merch for it. It's called Set Your Boundaries. We'll get to it later. Just we do. So if you want to order your own and be like us, we do encourage you to do that. But before I pass it over to the amazing Sal and Scarlett, just want to let folks know that this event is sponsored by Shoreline Community College and the WAVES program, worthy of achievement, validation, empowerment, and success for Asian American, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, and by the Big Oos Foundation. It's a local nonprofit organization committed to building vibrant communities through youth development, arts and culture, music and entertainment, radio, sports, and business. And also sponsored by the Office of Equity and Community Partnerships at King County Public Health and the APD program with Tacoma Pierce County Public Health. Yeah, so with that, again, thanks for spending your evening with us. I mean, the weather is really nice, so the fact that you're here with us hearing this conversation. And you can also, right, rewatch this. So for those of you who are rewatching, welcome. But with that, I pass it over to Scarlett and Sala.
Thank you, Celie. Welcome in, everyone. Whether you're tuning in via Facebook Live or you are here on the Zoom with us tonight, thank you for being with us this evening. As Celie said, you could be anywhere right now in the beautiful Pacific Northwest because it's so nice out. And who knows, it might last for like less than 5 minutes, but you could be out there enjoying the 5 minutes of the beautiful sun that we have, but you are here taking the time to invest in yourself. And then also just learning about boundaries. It's seriously my favorite. I say that with all the ones, but like honest, it's like every conversation is like a favorite of mine, especially with boundaries. And like Celie said as well, like we got merch for that. So I think Scarlett, can you like send if not, I can put the link to it into our chat if you want to go ahead and purchase that, because it's such a simple yet very, very powerful statement. Set boundaries, right? So and that's Scarlett's merchandise for her private practice. But anyways, thank you to our amazing sponsors for being able to make all of this available for us and accessible for our community. So truly couldn't do this without you. But I'm gonna go ahead and introduce myself. If you are new here this evening and for some reason you have missed part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're now at 7, and you're like, wow, I'm finally here. My name is Sala. I am a licensed mental health therapist here in Washington. I have my own private practice that I see clients out of. I'm also a student, and then also seeing clients that way. And then I'm also doing a lot of amazing community stuff with Scarlett through the different community partners that we work with. So really enjoy doing this work. Really enjoy doing this work, especially serving our community. So that's who I am. That's what I do. Our conversation here tonight is going to be so powerful. I always find it like, even though it's the same topic, but we have a different conversation every single time, because sometimes like different people show up in the different times that we have these conversations. So if we had this class a different day, different people showed up and we would have a different conversation. So it's always such a good, good thing to be a part of. So if you're here this evening, we really hope that you engage with us. Like I always say this, Scarlett and I are kind of like talkers. So we will talk your ear out, if you like give us the chance to. And also because this is something that we're very, very passionate about. We enjoy talking about our work. We enjoy talking about all the different things pertaining to mental health in our field. And so, these are things that like we enjoy to share with our community, and also information that you wouldn't otherwise get unless you're sitting across, paying money, lots of money, to be sitting across from a licensed person, licensed professional like Scarlett and I. But instead you're here and it's free to just click on a link or join in on the live. You're here with us this evening, and so engage with us. Whatever questions you might have, or maybe you need clarification on something, on any of the contents tonight, let us know in the chat. Unmute yourself and let us know. That's why we're here. So hopefully we'll get some good engagement tonight, and looking forward to having some good conversations. So for now, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Scarlett to introduce herself and get us.
Sala is very humble. She does way more than just community stuff. And so she's also a doctoral student. So I just got to boast my girl up because she does a lot. Not only do we do these things together, but we do a lot of our own individual stuff as well. So good evening, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon to wherever you are watching this at in the world. Welcome to tonight's community conversation. What's your boundary? Again, this is another fun class that I enjoy to teach. But before I go further, my name is Scarlett Ekeroma. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a boundaries coach, and I have been in this field for over a decade. Currently work through my private practice, Elevate Healing, and I also do this community work along with Sala, again, with a bundle of community organizations. And I'm truly grateful because what we're teaching is continuing to expand in the state of Washington and along the West Coast. So I'm really excited about where these community conversations are taking us. And so just a couple of house rules. If you have any questions or if you want to share, please keep it relevant to tonight's topic. Even for those who are on Facebook, watching the Facebook Live, please ask your question, or if you want to join us in the Zoom room, please don't hesitate to do that as well. But we love to hear from the community as well. So again, if you don't talk, we will. And I think just because part of when we talk about, we actually continue to share more of our own story, because we definitely want to be transparent in all the community conversations that we do. So again, this is class number 7, and then it's class number 8, and then we run it back until you all say, please do something else. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and set myself up, and then we'll go from there.
And as Scarlett is doing that, if you are in the Zoom, take a look at the chat, and I think Celi's going to post it in the Facebook Live as well in the comment section. We do have a event summary. Usually people be asking us like, can we get the slides? I'm like, no, you can't get the slide, bro. But you can get our cheat sheet though. Okay. And the event summary is usually where we just kind of like summarized everything and put it into like very, very simple, like, bullet points, so that it's easy for you to be able to refer back to. So that is available to you. And then also we have some surveys in there. So make sure that you click on those links and be able to complete those, because it only helps us to be able to keep doing what we're doing and have this resource available to you. Scarlett, you ready?
Yeah, or can you see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So welcome to tonight's community conversation. What's your boundary? So this boundaries class, the community conversation, is actually a shortened version of the boundaries masterclass that I have taught in the past. And part of when Sal and I got together, one of the things, this was one of the topics that we decided that needed to be shared amongst our community, because often we don't really hear about boundaries. So I'm going to tell a short story about just how I came about boundaries. And so, so like when I did my introduction, I said I was a boundaries coach, and that actually kind of just fell into my lap because what I noticed with all my clients that I have interacted with, um, that they lack knowledge and the skill of how to set healthy boundaries. So I really had to sit with, well, how did I learn how to set healthy boundaries? Because growing up, and even into my early adulthood, my boundaries were often frequently violated because I just didn't know what they were. And it actually wasn't until I was in grad school into my late 20s that I actually learned what boundaries were. And so what I recognized when my boundaries weren't honored, I would often become physically ill. So in the therapy world, we call those psychosomatic symptoms. So how I'd become physically ill is I would get nauseous, I would cry a lot. So I'd be in like some crying spells, I would get headaches and I would get body aches. And then what was interesting, I was internally flustered and I had a really challenge of how to calm down, which is now I knew as an adult, as I came into this therapy field, that was actually anxiety that I was experiencing. So I had a big wake up moment in 2010 where I was starting to do this life discovery and trying to figure out how can I live more healthily, where I not only needed to discover what my boundaries are, but also honor them and find the balance, so that I didn't isolate. And so the biggest lessons that I learned about boundaries is that even though I have them, it didn't mean that I was a bad person, and it didn't mean that I would be less loved. And the people or the person or the people who I set boundaries with didn't mean I loved them less either. So those were those big things that mindset that I really had to work on when it came to talking about boundaries. So before we go further, I just wanted to hear from the audience, and Sally, you can chime in as well. When you think or hear the word boundary, what are your ideas, thoughts, or feelings that come up? And if you're in the Zoom room, if you want to unmute, you can do that as well. Go ahead, Celie. I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I would say just like a set of circumstances or rules that keep you healthy.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that. We'll definitely go into what happens when you don't set them. You set boundaries, because it does happen.
In the chat, we have Emma that says creating rules that keep you safe. And then we have Kelly that said, what are my limits?
Oh, I love that. What are rules that keep me safe and what are my limits? Oh, all wonderful answers. Sal, what about you? What are your thoughts on the word boundary?
I think right now, if you ask me right now, I know so much about boundaries.
Exactly.
But I think I'll try and respond from a time when I didn't know what
Mhm.
what boundary is. So I think like before I even knew what boundary is, I think I looked at boundary as just like a blockade,
Mm,
something that you just got to put up. Like I
yeah.
just got to put something up, like something that's going to separate me, from another person. So,
Mm,
and that was it. That's, I was just like, oh, it's a boundary. That means don't cross over, or like,
mm,
don't go over to my neighbor's side or something like that. It's a
yeah.
boundary. But I think it was more so in the context of like a neighbor, and
Yeah.
that's it. I didn't think that boundaries can be applied to like relationships or
Yeah.
interpersonal relationships at that.
Yeah, I love that you shared that because I shared, I didn't learn about boundaries until I was in graduate school, and almost I was 28, 28, 29. And I would just remember hearing the word boundary and I'm like, what is that? What? So of course I only thought about boundaries in the sports world because I was an athlete. And so I only thought about like, okay, don't go around past this line because it's out of bounds. And so I would just remember, when thinking about personal boundaries, I just remember being like, I never heard of that before. So it was a lot of confusion, I would say, on my end. And when first starting to hearing about it, I was definitely highly apprehensive because I'm like, no, I don't think I could do that. And that's what I love about tonight's community conversation, because we were going to talk about the balance of that. So was there anything else that anybody wanted to add before I press forward? Go ahead, Sala.
We also have Vicky that said respecting, not to overstep.
Good. That's good.
Boundaries are different depending in the space we're in. And then Marie also said, know your boundaries is what time I can work and know when I cannot work and take rest. And then also Vicky says that also it's challenging as your children get into adulthood, respecting decision making.
Yeah. And it's part of, I think, the adjustment is when I talk with parents about allowing their adult children to make a decision, it's really an adjustment, because we're so used to protecting our kids when they're in our realm. And now that we've let them go, they're out into the world like they don't live with us anymore. Or they're, even if they do, it's just like, oh man, I don't know about that. And so I can definitely hold that space with you, Vicky. So thanks for sharing that. So as always, this is our agenda for tonight, that, you know, we just want to let you all know what is going to be forthcoming. So we're going to watch a short video about boundaries, and then we'll get into the meat of our presentation. Our community conversation is all things healthy boundaries, is the what and the why. Of course, we always include about culture. We always include, and in this part, we're going to talk about guilt, because because guilt can be a part of our culture as well. And then we'll talk about why is it hard. And then, of course, as we always end, we will give tips on how to start setting healthy boundaries. So I love when we find short videos about what we are going to talk about. So we're just going to watch again this quick video. I think it's about 2 minutes long. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask post video. And then Salo, let me know about the sound, please.
Today we're talking about personal boundaries, the invisible lines that define the edges of who we are. Personal boundaries help us navigate in the world. Knowing and managing where we end and the other person begins is essential to living a satisfying and healthy life. But when our boundaries are crossed, it can make us feel stressed, confused, and anxious. And as with most things to do with our brains, boundaries aren't one size fits all. We each set our own boundaries to allow some people to come close or to keep others at a distance. People can violate your boundaries in a number of ways. When someone does this, it's a big red flag. For example, if someone makes you feel like you don't have the right to your own individual thoughts and feelings, big red flag. Have you ever been told that you're responsible for someone else's bad behavior, violence, or abuse? A huge red flag. Or if someone always expects you to return texts or calls immediately, that's another red flag. Learning to manage our own boundaries is a necessary step in learning to love ourselves and others. When you set a boundary and the people in your life respect it, that's a huge sign that this is the type of person you want in your life. Like when someone asks your permission and doesn't force you into an uncomfortable situation, or when someone allows you to disagree with them without retaliation, or when you're allowed to say no to anything, including sex, drugs, parties, even requests for your time. When you're able to identify red and green flags, it allows you to strategically share your life with those around you. By strategic sharing, we mean that in every situation, you decide who has access to your body, mind, and personal information. With time and practice, you'll get better at being able to identify the red and green flags that define your personal boundaries. Through that process, you'll gain more trust in yourself and will be able to strategically share more of your life with the people around you that you know you can trust.
Like writing some quick notes. Anybody want to share their thoughts or their takeaways from this video? But I definitely have some as well. And Sal, if you would like to share as well.
I think one of the I like what there's so many things we can take away, but I think right in the beginning, I liked how it kind of like the spotlight is on you, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what boundary really is. It's for you. It's not for other people. It's not so that other people can feel good or can be good or can be anything. It's about you. Like that's what boundary is. And I think like to be able to, know about boundary and move forward and put down your own boundaries, you have to have the understanding that when you set boundaries, you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for other people. Right. So I'm gonna stop there because I want to kind of hear like people's thoughts on what else they took away from this short clip. But it was very powerful. I just love how I think in the beginning how it just immediately, highlights you and like your little square and who you want to let into your square.
For sure. Absolutely. Go
I
ahead,
think
Steve.
I put it in the chat before we played the video, but the idea of personal boundaries is actually kind of foreign. So like that thing that Salah said that pops up like personal boundaries, because it's like, you got to be there for the community, your family, whatever it takes, right? It's so
Yeah.
that principle of, oh, what, I can say no to these people.
Yeah.
But that's the tough part, right? Because then you go home and you have all these deep thoughts. They all hate me. I am not, but that's part of centering oneself, right? If we're trying to uplift, get better, get healthy. So, I mean, I would say that's the foreign part. Just like
Yeah.
I could do this for me, but
Yeah, and we'll definitely get more into that when we get towards the culture and guilt slide, because we definitely will refer to that, how guilt is used, and how it can violate your boundary. Does anybody else want to add anything before I add?
I can tag on to what Celie said about the personal boundaries and how it's so foreign. And I think like a cultural piece of that is if you are, if your background, ethnicity is, different or whatnot, like that definitely plays a part. Because
Absolutely.
in Pacific Islander community, Samoan community, like there is no such thing as a personal boundary. It's almost like it's non-existent. It's because
Yeah.
our culture is more so centered on the community, on the
Yeah.
collectiveness of the village. So a lot of things that are strongly tied to our culture centers around community. So our
Yeah.
focus, our mindset, our beliefs are usually about outward first
Yep.
before, I look to me, so even when it comes to like things like self-care, it's like self-care, like no, let's take care of others first before I can take care of myself. So, that's, and I think like we have to consider that part too, that cultural piece of why boundaries seem so foreign to us. It's not, and because it's not something that, comes natural to us in our cultures. Just because of that, because we're so strongly embedded, everything that we knew, background, our history, cultural values, all of that is all about taking care of other people, taking care of our village, taking care of our community, taking care of our families before we can even take care of ourselves. So when we're talking about, drawing this line, around me, then it's like, well, where's my auntie gonna go? What about my mom? What about my dad? What about my sister? What about my extended family? So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, yes, we understand that boundary is like a foreign concept, and we're not saying we're gonna do away with our own culture and just implement boundaries. Like, no, I think like just like with any of Scarlett and I's conversation, it's recognize, know, and understand where you are coming from as far as like and why you feel the way you do about things. But then if this is helping you, if it's gonna help you, then just think of boundary as if you need to set boundaries in your relationships, and then just think of it as a way to to be able to like better yourself, because if you better yourself, you'll be able to like help other people as well in your
For sure.
community. Mhm.
You know, as you were saying that, what popped up in my head is, oh, I wonder if some people have a view of if you have a personal boundary, is it disrespectful to them? You know, and so because of course in the community, it's, you know, especially growing in a Pacific Island community, it's literally community first. That's what we're taught. So that was just something that popped in my head. I think the biggest thing that I took away is when they talked about strategic sharing. And so they were just like, you know, basically saying not everybody has access to that information. So that connected to, again, why we talked about in our previous classes that it's important to talk to your emotionally safe people. You know, because it's, I think when it comes about talking about setting boundaries, it's like sometimes you have to run it through those emotions. So people be like, hey, I just want to make sure I'm not out of pocket. Is this, what are your thoughts if I set this boundary? Like I know I've done that with my safe, my emotionally safe people. And they'll let me know, be like, well, can we adjust it to possibly introduce this? Not telling me what I need to do, but just presenting an option. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Yep.
Sala, go ahead.
We
I see.
have Kelly in the chat that said
Today we're
setting
talking
boundaries allows you to let people know what is acceptable to you and what's not. Absolutely.
Absolutely, for sure. So, I mean, thank you everyone for your input, you know, because again, it's such a different concept to talk about boundaries among, you know, because Sal and I mainly talk to our AA and HPI communities, and it's really helping because all of what we're talking about in every conversation we ever talk about, community conversation, is finding the balance. Because like Sala said, we're not telling you to get rid of culture. It's just culture can't be the, we can't put that first all the time when it comes at a detriment to our physical health. So that's where the challenge lies in. So here's a definition of what healthy boundaries are. And this is by Anne Catherine, and this is from her book, Where You End and I Begin. So what she says is healthy boundaries protect without isolating, contain without imprisoning, and preserve identity while permitting external connections. So here's a breakdown of how we're going to break it down. So when it says boundaries help protect without isolating, meaning it helps you protect you internally and externally and keeps you connected to you, yourself, and others. Contain without imprisoning, meaning you get to have options, make choices for your life, and you give yourself permission to do so. The last part, preserve identity while permitting external connections, meaning not giving up who you are to appease or make another person comfortable, and you're still being able to stay connected to them. Does anybody have anything that they want, any thoughts about what, in regards to what healthy boundaries in this definition is? Sal, is there anything you wanted to add?
Nope, I think the definition is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
You know, but I did appreciate having to break down all of the, because it's straightforward, but it's still so much that's jam-packed in there. So I appreciate
Yeah.
how you were able to kind of like, you know, break that down for us, and be able to like really kind of go into it. But I think I'll just speak a little bit on the protect without isolating. I think like that's the biggest thing, because I think, remember in the beginning, what I initially thought before I knew anything about boundaries, what I initially thought boundaries was, it's just something that you put up, you know, like a barrier or something
Yeah.
that, you know, you just like, I know I was thinking more of like a physical structure. I didn't think it could apply to like relationships. But this piece about protecting without isolating, sometimes if I think that way about boundaries and how it's a barrier, barriers can feel isolating, can
Yeah.
be something that like separates me from people that in my life that I obviously would like to connect with. So I love that it points out that healthy boundaries protects without isolating. So it's protecting me, but at the same time, it's not isolating me from the people that I still choose to have in my life. So I really
Yeah.
like how that kind of plays out in that way as well. because it's important. I think it's important for people to know that, like, sometimes people, when I do work with clients, and we do boundary work, they hear the word boundary and they're like, oh my gosh, like, like they know it's they feel like it's whatever negative perceptions they might have about boundary, but then I go into talking to them and explaining to them what boundary is, and then they're like, oh, okay, I didn't, like, yes, so it's just learning something new about boundary, and knowing that, like, it's not meant to separate you from your loved ones. It's just sometimes our loved ones, are the ones that's hurting us, right? Like, sometimes it's our families, sometimes it's our friends are the ones that, like, just keeps crossing over those boundaries and are the ones that's hurting us. So then a boundary, when it says that it's there a healthy boundary that's there to protect you, the boundary is like having something there to where you just don't keep getting stepped over.
Yeah.
You just don't keep getting taken advantage of. It's just, it's something that's there where if you say no, I can't keep taking you, I can't keep driving you to work and you never give me any gas money, that's just an example.
Okay.
But like, if you can't,
Real life
a
example.
boundary is something that's there to just protect you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can make boundaries, and Scarlett's going to talk about it more later, but you can make it to where boundaries can work for you, to where you can say, you know what, if you've had a friend that's just been, asking you however many times every single day to drive them to work, and because they're your friend and because you're tired and you've been working 40 hours and you still have to drive them to work, and you feel like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to disappoint them, but obviously it's causing you a lot of distress. So a boundary is there to say, you know what, you can tell your friend, no, you can't drive them to work. But at the same time, you can make it work for you to where, you know what, I can't drive you to work every single day, but what I can do is I can drive you to work on my days off, which is 2 days a week. So you see how you were able to say no, it's a boundary, but you still were able to make it work for you, not for your friend, right? So, and that's what boundary is. That's what it protects you, so that you're not working 40 hours a week and still have to, chauffeur your friend around to, to and from work, but you're able to, like, be able to protect yourself, and then at the same time be able to, like, still keep that friendship or that relationship if you want it. If you don't want that friendship or relation, you can be done with it.
Yeah. I mean, because we're essentially talking about staying healthily connected to people, so that again, it doesn't take away from us. And so I think just to kind of summarize what Salah said, oftentimes people think boundary, and that means remove, like get rid of, and that doesn't apply to our people. It just doesn't, because one thing I love about our community is, like, man, we show up for each other when it's time to show up. But in some instances, like Salah was saying, we do have to set healthy boundaries with them. And it's not saying no, it's saying no in a different way. Like Salah was saying, no, I can't take you to work every day, but here's the 2 days that I can take you. Like what, because it's still staying connected with them. And so, like, I'll give an example of a personal example is, like, when I go home, I don't stay at my house. At my father's house, I stay at a hotel, and he couldn't understand why. And he was just like, why would you, like, it was a conversation, because he felt a certain way about it. But part of what I had to say with him was a boundary, because I said, Dad, everybody has their own room, and I don't want anybody to remove themselves from their living space to accommodate me. That's not fair to them. So when I sat and talked with him about it, he was just like, oh, that makes sense, because I wanted to honor whoever was living in my father's house, their boundary. Because I know how I would feel if I had to give up my room, because I've done that before as a kid. And I'm like, I didn't like it. So, but you do what you have to do to accommodate whoever you have to accommodate. So that's just one example. Even my child had said to me at Target, I called him a name, and before we had laughed about it, and he said to me, he said, Mom, could you not call me that name anymore? I said, "Oh, what happened?" I said, I thought it was funny." He's just like, "Yeah, it was. It's not funny anymore." I said, "Oh, is there any reason why?" And he goes, "No, it's just my boundary." I go, "Oh, well, moving on. Okay." And so I have never called him that ever since. So that's what I'm saying is just like there's a boundaries can. I think somebody said earlier about like you set up boundaries in different areas of your life because it's true. There are different areas in your life where you will have different boundaries with different people, different organizations, and such forth. So, anybody else want to add anything or any questions before I press forward? Are we
Just
good?
want to add that, like, how your dad feels, it's a cultural thing.
It is. It is.
It
But
is. It's such a
yeah.
foreign thing. Like, what? You're coming home and you're staying at a hotel? Unheard of.
Yeah, and
Unheard of.
he's
It's a
gotten
cultural thing. It's sometimes even it's like, you know, in I don't know. It's just like even going back home to Samoa, it's very, very foreign. Like, so
oh
my
yeah.
husband grew up and raised here in the States, and when we went to visit Samoa and he wanted to stay at the resort because he thinking he on vacation, I said, "We gonna stay at my family house." He said, no, we ain't. We staying at the resort because he want to wake up when he wake up and do all this. And I said, yeah, my family is gonna feel some type of way about that
Yeah.
because it's really like that's just you know how it is when you go home. It's how it
Yeah.
is, and sometimes even some of them might even consider it disrespectful. So
Yeah.
you know we came to like a sort of like a compromise to where you know I had to like let my auntie know like, okay, auntie, you know, like we'll come over for every dinner, you know, and that way we're not eating any of the resort food. We'll just be here and eat your dinner, but then we'll sleep at the hotel. So you know it
Exactly.
is can be, so you have to like have your boundary
Find
because
that
at the same
balance.
time,
Yeah.
like me knowing the culture, I knew like if I was just me, oh for sure I'd stay at my family's house. But at the same time, I have to also respect my husband's boundaries and be like, okay, this man did not grow up here, so I know he
Yeah.
don't care for nobody. So he'd be like, look, no, we staying at the resort. So anyways,
Yeah.
like it's just being able to find that compromise
Yeah.
to
That
where
balance.
it's going to work for you and your
Yeah.
family. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful balance of what you're talking about with Sala is because I had the same thing I had to say to my father. I will come over every day. I will eat lunch and dinner with you and I will go back after dinner. But it's because it's what works, finding that balance to honor not just myself, but honor my father because his thing was quality time. And so, and I think that's the thing, there's a beauty in finding the balance of that. And so that's why when we talk about boundaries, this is what we are referring to. So anything else before I press forward? Just want to make sure. We good in the chats? Okay, cool. All right. Oh, why are boundaries important? Question that I have for you all, and you can either unmute or put it in the chat, and for the Facebook, put it in the comments. What are your thoughts and feelings when your boundaries are violated? I could go on about this one. Go ahead, Celie.
Next time, like man, next time we're gonna stick to this. Just so it was like that next time, just you know what, we're gonna be better next time. Let's just roll with it. You know, they need this.
It's almost like making excuses.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's tough. And we'll talk about excuses in our slides as well. No, yeah, that's a good one. Anybody else? So the question is, what are your thoughts and feelings when your boundaries are violated?
I think definitely feel slighted. You know, I would feel upset. I feel because like when you are violating someone's boundary, that means like crossing over to you know my area, you know, to like my maybe like I'm envisioning like my own personal bubble or something. And so when someone is like crossing over without my permission, you know, that can I would feel upset for sure, you know, because you know it's my space and maybe I want my space to look a certain way, feel a certain way, you know, whatever. But like if someone's coming over and I didn't invite them over, I would feel some type of way. It's almost like having you know what, this might be a good one. It's almost like, have you ever, if has anyone, please feel free to let me know. But has anyone ever like how would you feel if people came over to your house uninvited? So here's I have like another story for
Listen,
so I have another story. So
I'll say this real quickly. When I got my very first apartment and I had my friends and my coworkers, I had set with them. I go, do not come over my place unannounced, because even though my car is out there, I will not open my door. One of my friends did that and I didn't open the door. And she was like, oh, you were serious? I said, yeah, no, I don't care. But from that point on, she knew not to do that and she never did it again. And then she ended up telling our other friends in our friend group, and they were like, oh man, that's messed up. I said, no, I warned you all. I told y'all. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
similar story as well. I think I remember having family members, you know, stay at my house, you know, while back. And, you know, I think sometimes in our community, or in our culture, you know, even if you're a guest, it's almost like, well, it's our house. It's like, no, it's my house. You know, so then like I remember one time, a long time ago, I came home, you know, I'm tired, been working, came home, and my family members that were staying with me had friends over. You know, so I'm like walking into my home, I'm tired, I just want to relax, and there's like all these people that I now have to, you know, feel like I have to greet and say hello and all these things. And so I felt like I didn't know what I was feeling then, but reflecting back now, that was definitely a boundary violation for me. That was definitely a boundary violation, because yes, it's again, so there's that also like that cultural piece that's there, right? Like it's just how it is in our culture sometimes. Like we very opening, welcoming, family, everybody is family kind of thing, when it's like, no, like I'm very particular about people that I have over in my house and things like that. Absolutely. So I didn't know it then why I felt the way that I did. But reflecting back on it now, I'm like, oh, I think that was a boundary violation. I think I just didn't like that. But here's the thing, I didn't even communicate that to the people that, like, you know, was staying with me. So then how were they supposed to know that it was a boundary when I didn't even tell them that I was okay or not okay with it? So, and I'm sure you'll go into that later too.
Yeah, we will go into that. So, Lena, I saw that you unmuted. Did you want to share?
Hi, everyone. No, I just wrote it in the chat, and like depending to the culture that you are you like following and where you're raised, so things are totally different. But I totally agree to have boundaries, because without boundaries and building good boundaries, you are the one who I would say suffer sometimes and get really upset because some people, they don't they don't care what you feel, you know. They just like do the bad thing that they feel like, okay, or maybe they don't feel like it is bad, but on you it really is like a bad impact. But it really upsets if people are like doing things that you never want to do it to the others, you know, and then they do it to you, and that really like myself, I deeply gets really upset, and it just like negatively impacts me. And then even like for days I would be thinking about it and emotionally not feeling well. So these are the feeling that I experienced actually.
Oh, thanks for sharing that, Lena. Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like, and this is all what boundaries are. It's just really just, this class is just an introduction to that, because again, you know, we are teaching boundaries is teaching people how to treat you. And one of the things that, you know, we'll talk more about in this class is what I share is when you set a boundary with somebody and however they react, that's information for you. you get to decide what you want to do and how you want to further interact with that individual. So often, if I see my boundary is not honored, then I decide, okay, how do I want to interact with this? Still love them, still want to stay connected, but maybe I can only stay connected with them in a certain area, not in whatever area they violated. So I'm saying it's really information for you. Oftentimes when people get mad, you set up a boundaries because it's an indicator that, wait, you're not going to let me treat you like how I want to treat you. Is that what you're saying? Like you're going to say, because for them, it doesn't hurt them because they're not recognizing what their behaviors are doing, how that, like you said, is negatively impacting you. Because of course, if you're saying, oftentimes what I've come across is some people just don't want to be corrected and don't want to change their behavior. They just want to act the way they want to act. But if that's who they are, then you have to decide for you what you want to do.
Thank you. So totally agree, and I appreciate this. Thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely. Go ahead, Sala.
Kelly in the chat says, it makes me feel that my input doesn't matter and my values are disregarded. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll say this though, it's like having no boundaries. The only person that benefits from that is the other person, whoever that is. The other person is the only person that benefits when you have no boundaries.
Absolutely, because again, it's like because if we don't have boundaries, it allows people to treat us a certain way. And if they're so used to treating us a certain way, and then when you say, hey, you can't do that anymore, they'd be like, well, why? It worked for me. And they're not considering you because it worked for them. Like Sala was saying. So the boundary, again, like we talked about, it's a protective factor for you. So good conversation. So here's why they're important, because I definitely want to continue to honor time, is it helps create a healthy relationship with yourself and creates an emotional safe space. It's a protective factor. Big thing I talk about when I work with clients is when you create an intentional relationship with yourself, this helps increase intentionality with others. So kind of what we've talked about a little before. However you treat yourself, that indicates how you allow others to treat oftentimes in this space, and we've come across, our community or an individual will suffer in silence because we just don't know what a healthy boundary is. And so when we're talking about an emotional safe space, when you protect it, it's a protective factor. It's one where you can discuss challenges and not feel like the relationship is going to end or result in a fight, gossip, or the big one, as I always have said, I've been saying lately, is causing generational grudges because you set a boundary. Generational grudges is a big thing amongst our community because I have witnessed them and observed them very closely. So it does happen. Next is you understand, share, and identify your likes, needs, and wants. And you get to share with others how you like to be treated and what's acceptable. Oftentimes, we don't take time to figure out ourselves. And that's what boundaries help create. You help figure out, again, what is your likes, needs, and wants. And when you get to know you better, then you're able to share it. Now, again, if somebody doesn't honor your boundaries, it goes back to that is information for you. What do you want to do with it? Decide how you want to move, how you want to navigate whatever that relationship is. And then lastly is you practice using your voice to share your needs, likes, needs, and wants. Once you set a boundary, and if it continues in the more and more you set your boundary, once it gets violated, it will continue to push you forward to share what's going on. So for example, I had set a boundary with a friend and I noticed it was about the third time they violated the boundary. So I had to call it, and I was feeling uncomfortable. So I had to have a conversation with a friend. We're still friends. And I said, hey, when you do this, this is what it makes me feel like. I need that to discontinue. And they're like, oh, I didn't even know I was doing that to you. And so we had a really good dialogue about that. So again, when you set a boundary and you're consistent with it, and when it gets violated, it literally practices pushing your voice forward. Anybody have any questions or want to add anything before I go forward? We good, Sala?
Yep, we are good to go.
Cool, cool. Let's talk about culture. Let's talk about culture and guilt. So here's the thing. I'm gonna say this. I know when we talk about culture and guilt, it'll ruffle some feathers. It'll because we're used to having this everything has to look a certain way when it comes to culture. But part of, like I said, if I didn't bring these things up, it will continue the same behavior patterns that I've seen in our culture. And so that's why I if you feel uncomfortable, it's okay. You don't have to participate. I will say it. But if you have any responses, please don't hesitate to share those as well. You can either unmute yourself or put it in the chat. And if you're on the Facebook, put it in the chat there as well. So question is, how does culture and your upbringing impact your boundaries? That is the question.
I think like this is some of what Celia and I mentioned a bit earlier, right? Like, with just being able to like, not like that, what was it, that personal boundaries that we talked about with Celia, and how it's like, it's kind of non-existent almost culturally, because like culturally it's like it's ingrained in us to serve community, like it's almost like the measure of our worth or something is kind of on this scale of how often or how much you give to community. Like that's the measure of our self-worth, is we by doing all of these good things that we're doing for our community. So that idea, why it's so foreign, this idea of like personal boundaries is because it's like, well, because we're almost like, we're meant to, look outward first. Like we're meant to like take care of other people first instead of ourselves. So anything that has to do with like us and taking care of us first is not really a priority. Because we have to focus on the community, we have to focus on the village, we have to focus on the people that we're serving and that we're working with, and if they're doing okay, we're doing okay. So I think that's where that culture piece kind of impacts boundaries a bit, or personal boundaries a bit, is and how it kind of comes in and influences how we see boundary.
I agree. Celia, I saw you on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I like in your picture there, responsibility, I like that responsibility thing, because it's you feel responsible, right? As the eldest kid, or the most well-off sibling. I mean, you just feel that responsibility. You take that weight on your shoulder, and you just follow through, right? I mean, you're probably going to vent to your siblings, your cousins, your coworkers, other folks, but you're going to do it anyways, just because you're holding that responsibility for the culture and for the community too, right? Because I mean, I was laid up like sick wise, but then I had to get back because I was like, I got to get back. They need me. But at the end of the day, actually, they don't, right? We could, of course, corrected some other ways to try to figure things out, but it's just that overwhelming sense of responsibility that you have to, uplift, this work and just other things that you do. So it makes it hard, right? So it's just like the cultural guilt and stuff. I mean, it exists. Yeah, talk story with family members to your friends named Sala and Scarlett, but you press on.
Yes, we for sure can talk story. I think that's the thing why when I created this picture, why I wanted to put responsibility on there, because oftentimes responsibility is associated with guilt. And so, and we'll go a little bit more into that, but does anybody else want to add anything, or is there anything in the chat that was added as well before I say? We good? We're good?
Good in the Zoom chat, but I think I'll probably add.
Are we good?
Well, there's something in the Facebook one
Okay.
Chris says boundaries in what aspects, please?
So in this case, we're talking about personal healthy boundaries, Chris. That's what we're referring to. So, and Sala, you were fine, right?
Yes, I was just saying like nothing in the Zoom chat, and then I'll probably say something about guilt later.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're gonna talk about guilt. I think when again, the cultural impact of boundaries, how does culture in my upbringing impact boundaries, is I had to really learn to identify what boundaries mean to me that includes the Western and Eastern concepts, because we've talked about this in the class before, where in the Westernized world, it's all about the individual. But in the Eastern, we learn about, again, the group, the community, the family, how that's an important factor. And so for me, it was just finding that balance of that. So, because of course, like I said, when we talk about the impact of the family community system, again, finding that balance, because again, we're often tasked to put that family or system first. And what ends up happening in that is we tend to not either develop or we lose our self-identity in that. And so I have seen oftentimes within our community about when somebody comes into my office, they have a challenge with telling me who they are without saying what they do. And when they do that, I just said, "Oh, that just lets me know we just got some work to do." That's not a bad thing, because if we're not taught to think for ourselves and be a part of the community, you just don't learn those skills. So next thing we're going to talk about, this next session, we're going to talk about guilt. So there's going to be a lot of things said about guilt. And so this is what the summation of when it comes to boundaries and guilt and culture. Guilt is often learned and rooted in feelings of emotional abandonment, because there's that fear of rejection. And abandonment often leads to avoidance. So we learn emotional abandonment very early. And I say that because we often experience, if we don't do something for someone, somehow we learn that their love can be removed. And that if you don't do what they say or what they ask, because love for a lot of us equals acceptance. And of course, we want to be loved and accepted, but somehow love and acceptance got intermingled with guilt. And so when you experience repetitive emotional abandonment, it becomes challenging to learn how to trust yourself and trust yourself and trust others, and you can become highly emotionally avoidant. Next is guilt is just a survival pattern taught by our caretakers. It's a generational pattern. Oftentimes, guilt can be used as control. And so what I always talk with my clients about when we refer to whoever their caretakers is that they're only doing what they learned. So I always talk with my clients about providing not only self-grace, but grace towards the family members, and still holding the caretakers accountable for whatever negative behavior or trauma that they experienced. Because unfortunately, people in our lives, most likely the ones who we are close to, or basically anybody, repeatedly use guilt to manipulate, which is a form of control. So for example, Celie mentioned a comment earlier. So for example, it could be like, well, if you love me, then you would do this, and you fill in the blank. Lastly is you are taught to protect your caretaker's feelings at the cost of you. So we learned how to self-sacrifice very, very early. Again, this is survival thinking, and it trains us to be strong and self-sacrifice again at an early age. And we don't learn how to balance taking care of ourselves internally and externally. And we often learn something or someone is more important than self. One of the things we've always talked about in our classes across the board, or community conversations across the board, is if you actually take care of yourself first and do it healthily, you will actually be better to the family or whatever system that you are a part of. Any comments? Any questions? Anybody want to share anything? And Sala, go ahead and chime in as well.
Well, since everyone is just jumping at the opportunity to share
It's a
on
lot.
this
Let me
very,
just say this
very
before
heavy
you.
slide.
Oh, yeah, so let me just say this. This is a lot of information to take in. And that's why I said it's going to be because part of what, and this is something that I teach my clients, because part of what we have to do is unroot what we have learned and really find self-importance, that your words do matter. Because I have come adults, whether young adults or elderly, really have a hard time finding their voice because of holding on to guilt. They were like, well, I just feel guilty if I share somebody how I'm really feeling this. So we're able to go through these, like, this is a pattern. Where did we learn this from? How do we undo this? You were taught this and this, and they were just, and it's making those connection points so that you can do differently for yourself, especially if, in particular, if you're wanting a different result in your relationships, especially the relationship you have with yourself. So go ahead, Sala.
Kelly in the chat says, I must admit it affects the way how I feel about certain things. And sometimes it's hard to have an open mind, but I'm trying very hard to be more understanding and accepting. For sure.
Absolutely.
And then Chris from Facebook says, working with homeless population, the boundaries are very different because culture and heart say, or your heart says one thing, but professionalism says another.
Yeah. And here's the thing, because I've definitely worked with the homeless before. And what was so interesting about that is they didn't like that I had boundaries, because what I did with them is I made them responsible. I said, I'm going to have you call so you can ask for what you need. And they said, well, why are you doing that? Somebody, the caseworker before you did it for me. I said, and that's fine. I said, but what I'm trying to do too is empower you to use your voice. They had never heard that before. And all the individuals that I had worked with, because they were, and that was because it was a revolving door. And so I had to be like, what can I do to help them be self-sufficient in this small way? And it was just making a phone call and asking her. And the result that happened, because I set that boundary with them, they said, oh man, I feel better. I feel like I can make calls on my own. I said, oh, good. I'm glad that was helpful. You could feel that way. So yes, it is definitely a different, you have to, part of what it is when I'm just meeting people where they're at. Of course, I know they can't do a list of things that I feel that would not be helpful. But the one thing I knew that they could do was ask for what they needed from whatever resource they were trying to reach out.
Reading Chris's comment from Facebook reminds me of what a story that someone had shared in relation to boundary, but in a different context. And this person was speaking on the story of the Good Samaritan in the Bible, and how I've never seen boundaries applied in that way. And I think, like, hearing about, like, I guess when you're out there and you're serving people and your heart wants one thing, and at the same time, like, professionalism says otherwise. And what this person says about the Good Samaritan story is how you can even look at that story as, like, the Good Samaritan did have boundaries. He had boundaries to where he saw a person in need, he got down and he helped that person, took that person to the inn and paid for maybe like a couple days to stay there, and then he went about his ways. If the Good Samaritan didn't have any boundaries, and maybe the person that he was helping was like, well, can you just stay a little bit more? Or why can't you stay more? Or can you help me more? So now maybe this person is going to feel guilty to leave them, and maybe he's going to end up staying. And now wherever he was planning to go, the Good Samaritan, now he's probably missing his obligations, his responsibilities at wherever it is that he was planning on going in the first place. And now he's staying there with this person that he helped. And maybe this person that he helped is going to, maybe they don't have anybody, and maybe they want him to go look for his family or something like that. And if this Good Samaritan didn't have any boundaries, probably would have just went along, right? Because the heart, like, my heart is here. I want to help. I want to do this. I want to do all this. But at the same time, at the cost of maybe whatever's going on in his own life and his own responsibilities. And so now, because he had boundaries, he did what was within his control to do. He was able to do what he could do in that moment, which was help this person, take him to the inn, pay for whatever it is that, stay there, and he went about his way, and now someone else is going to help him. He knew what he was capable of doing. He knew what his capacity was in helping, and he did that. And so that reminded me of, like being able to, like what Chris shared, being able to work with the homeless population, and why I also think it's important to have boundaries. It's not that like it's different. It's the same. Boundaries are the same. It's still there to protect you. And sometimes we are so passionate about the work that we do, it may not feel like it because we're so passionate about it, right? But then we don't want that passion to die out. We don't want that passion to be snuffed out by being burnt out, And so having those boundaries there are there to protect you in the job that you do, so that you don't get burnt out, so that you are able to, like, be able to have some time to yourself, and then still go and give back to the people that you want to help.
Absolutely. Very well said. Very well put. Thanks. Are we good in the chat? Just want to make sure. Awesome. So here's the reason why we talk about culture and our upbringing, because part of what Saul and I, what we find it a very important factor is to help whoever comes to our classes, continue to help increase self-awareness. And so when you think about your culture and upbringing, it helps you understand your family's positive and negative relationship patterns, those generational patterns. And it also helps you understand your self-esteem and how it impacts it both positively and negatively. Because when you understand and explore the roots of who you are, you do increase self-awareness and you are able to show up for yourself differently. In regards to when I said it helps you understand you, I often have clients who come in and say to me when it comes to behavior, and they will say, I don't know why I do that. So then I say, well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about how you grew up. And every time we do that, they're able to connect how their upbringing plays a role and how it plays a role in their adulthood and how they currently behave. So the emphasis I want to make again, yes, our caregivers did their best, and it's now your choice to help improve and create new generational behaviors and patterns. Because again, you have the power of choice. Comments, questions? Good. Good, cool. All right, why is it hard? Because it is. Like, I'm not gonna act like boundaries aren't hard. It is because it is such a new concept for a lot of us. Like when I first started to set boundaries, oh man, talk about I would fail. Like I was just like, oh well, let me just readjust and let me think about what actually works for me. Because when I did set a boundary, I set a boundary that was more suitable for whoever the person I was setting with. Because even though even though it was still coming at a detriment for me, because then I realized, I go, I don't think that's really a boundary that I want to continue to pertain or keep. So yes, boundaries are hard and it's okay. The one thing I know about our people is we know how to do hard things, and we always overcome and work through and navigate through hard things. And that's just what I love about, honestly, just our community in general. So of course, one of the first things is, like we talked about a little bit earlier, is you are used to self-sacrificing and or being a rescue or a fixer, and this impacts our confidence and self-esteem. Again, we've talked about before in our previous classes, and we're often not taught about feelings, about boundaries. And like I said earlier, I didn't learn about boundaries till I was 28, 29 years old and in graduate school to become a therapist. I think what's unfortunate is that you get to the point of self-sacrificing that you're so comfortable with you're comfortable with it. And it teaches you again to often self-sacrifice. Next is, sometimes if they have the title or family or friend or loved one, it means we often let them treat us any kind of way. So one of the first challenges I always give my clients when we talk about whoever they are talking about in session, I said, if you actually remove the title of said person, for example, mom, dad, uncle, whoever, and you actually looked at the quality of the relationship, would you be around them as much? because often we give more credit to the title of who someone is in our life rather than looking at the quality of the relationship. And, you know, and in this case, when it comes to family or loved ones, we are often, we can be passive. And so like Celie was saying something earlier, like when we talked about just making excuses. So for example, we can make an excuse if somebody violates our boundaries. It's just like, oh man, you know, that's just mom, dad, uncle. You know how it is. You know how they are. And but it still is a violation of whatever boundary violation they are doing towards you, because again, it impacts you negatively. Because family members and loved ones and friends, and whoever is close to us, are often our frequent violators of our boundaries. And oftentimes it's just because of the title we hold on to of them. And then lastly, like we shared before, we're not taught how to share our feelings and or set healthy boundaries. Again, if my caretakers knew how to set boundaries, I know for a fact they would have taught me. I know for the fact they would have taught me how to share feelings. So in that part, this is where again, giving yourself grace is very, very important. Because again, if you take care of you, you will be better to you and whatever system that you are a part of. Again, what I said a little bit earlier, when I always ask my clients, could you tell me who you are without saying what you do? And again, if they're unable to answer it, just lets me know we got some work to do. And it's let me know we got work to do and helping them find that balance of self, family, community, work, parenthood, whatever system that they are a part of. So any questions, any comments? And Sal, if you wanted to share anything.
Oh, no comments. Just point blank, boundaries is hard. But and also often the most difficult people to set boundaries with are, of course, your family. I know for me it is. It's always hard to set boundaries with your loved ones. But like Scarlett said, they are often the most frequent violators of them because it's just they're comfortable, you know, and you're comfortable with them. You're comfortable, they're comfortable, and you know, sometimes in that comfortability and that amount of comfortability, you know, we can feel like, you know, what's yours is mine and what's mine is yours kind of mindset, you know, when it's like, no, it's not. And because then you get to have your own, you know, you starting to come into your own. So you have your own way of thinking about things, feeling about things. So you are your own self, you are your own person. And that's why in the beginning, when it talks about boundary as like in a physical sense, your body is also a boundary, like your skin is a physical boundary. This is why whenever someone breaks your skin, whether that's a punch, a cut, or whatever, that's a violation of your boundary, of your physical boundary. So see it as you know, as in that sense, like it's not only like a physical thing, but it's also in relationships and interpersonal relationships. But it is difficult, but definitely very rewarding.
Yeah.
And it may take time, but like I said, it's rewarding.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So for example, I had a client who often would get repetitive phone calls from a parent. And part of it, she's like, I just feel like I always have to answer and this and that. And I said, well, do you want to? And the individual said, well, no. I said, so can we limit how many times we answer the call? I said, can we at least choose 2 times that we don't answer the call? And she was like, oh yeah, I can handle that. So that's what I'm saying. That's how small we can start. It doesn't have to be like, I'm not going to talk to my mom this day. No, or my father this day. It's just like, can we just limit so until you get comfortable with it? That's why it's important to, you know, when we teach these things and in classes, like how can we set boundaries that we can manage? And I was talking with clients about it. Let's just set something small that you can manage, because when you're able to do it on a small scale, it helps build up confidence. Okay, I know I can handle this. Maybe I can add maybe I won't answer it 4 times today. That's what I'm saying. That's the beauty about boundaries. You get to adjust it to what works for you, what keeps you healthy, you know, what keeps you not feeling like they just keep taking from you. Any comments, any questions? We good? Cool. All right, let's talk about tips. Here's the thing: all the tips that given in this lesson are a starting block. It's a starting block, and it's how you can continue to improve self. And these are the same tips that I teach my clients in my private practice. And the reason why I said this is a starting block, because again, it's going to be a challenge. This is a different challenge because we're talking about, again, setting boundaries. And biggest thing that we are talking about, when I'm talking about these tips, is how you can work on self. Because again, however you do you, if you don't have boundaries within your own self, then it's going to be challenging to set boundaries with other people. So here's boundary tip number 1. How you think about yourself matters. Thoughts are connected to your feelings and behaviors. Every behavior and feeling that you have is always connected to a thought. Because anytime I work with clients, when they talk about a behavior, they exhibited behavior, I said, well, tell me how you got there. What thought happened in your mind? And they're like, oh, well, I thought this, that's why I got like this, and that's why I felt like this. So I'm going to give you a personal example when I talk about because in this world, it's called the thought triangle in the therapy world. So here's how the thought triangle works, and I'm gonna give you a personal example. So one of the negative thoughts that I used to have consistently was, I am not enough. So the thought was, I'm not enough. The feelings that were associated with that was I felt unworthy, awkward, I isolated often, felt miserable, and I felt embarrassed. The behavior that I exhibited was anger. Like I would be physically aggressive. I suffered in silence. I didn't reach out for help. I didn't share truthfully, and I often cried in isolation. So that's the negative thoughts that I used to have. When I started working on myself to improve that, the thought I changed to, I deserve good things. So this is the positive side of it. I deserve good things, and I am enough. The feelings that I felt was I still felt awkward because, again, I wasn't used to having positive self-talk. But then I started feeling like warm inside, and then I felt grateful and thankful. The behaviors that I did, which changed, was I smiled more. I took myself on more walks. And then I I learned to celebrate small victories. And I started sharing truthfully with those who I identified as emotionally safe. So again, how you think about yourself is highly important, and it highly matters, because however you think about yourself impacts the rest of your body. Any remarks, any questions? And Sal, if you want to add anything.
Good to go. Just Kelly in the chat said, I can totally relate. Family relationships can be very challenging to deal with.
Oh yeah, we're getting that. That's a whole class we can do about family dynamics. So, okay. So again, how you think about yourself matters. Remember, thoughts impact feelings and behaviors. All of that. So however you feel always can be traced back to a thought. Next tip is redefine or expand your definition of family and friend to a more personal one. Identify characteristics, traits, behaviors that are important to you. So in this sense, what I work on with clients is we reduce the cultural societal definition and include what's important to you. Doesn't mean you can't include however culture and society defines family and friend, but you also get to have a say in what that actually means to you. Again, finding that balance. So when we talk about identifying characteristic traits and behaviors, so here's how I help clients define that personally. So I want you to think about a characteristic or trait that is important to you and makes you feel safe. And then I want you to think about, how does that look like in behavior form? So for example, if love or care is part of your definition, then what does love and care look like in behavior form for you? You can ask yourself, what behaviors make me feel loved and cared for? And I say that to you, we have to have our own personal definition, because what love and care for me may not be the same as Sala or anybody in this class. So again, you have to personally define what are those things for you. So again, redefine or expand your definition of family or friends to a more personal one. Any questions? Solid, you want to add anything?
You're good.
Awesome. Again, redefine. And there's nothing wrong with redefining. Again, if you want to include what culture and society, whatever the dictionary defines, that's fine, but also include what's important to you. Tip number 3, limit using or, because or is a limiter. Or is actually confining, and frequently it comes with some type of pressure. It's kind of more like an ultimatum. And begin and practice using the word and. And is used to remind you of your options and choices and assist in helping you give yourself permission. In this sense, it is important to be kind to yourself because then how you treat yourself indicates how you will allow others to treat you. So again, limit use. I'm not going to say stop because that's unrealistic. So it's just like, let's limit that. And let's start practicing using and. So here's an example of the power of and at work. So the power of and is, I don't deserve to be treated nicely, and I'm going to practice treating myself nicely because I do want to experience niceness. And then lastly is, another example is, I love my family, and there are times they have hurt me, and I can set healthy boundaries with them. So that is the importance of or. So for example, if I said, let's kind of use or as an example for the last one, I love my family, or I can set healthy, or I can just remove them and set healthy boundaries with them. So that's what I'm saying. That's the reason why we want to limit using or, because it presents pressure and almost like an ultimatum. Any questions, any comments?
No comments.
Cool. And that's it, people. That's tonight's community conversation. We are done. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Let's see, stop sharing. And so our information, like I said, it's on there. And again, this is just a beginning, a starting block when we talk about when we're talking about those tips, because again, all of those were related to you and not having someone else do it. And that's the big thing that especially when we work on with our clients, is like, what do you need to do for you in order to take care of you? Because you are an important factor. And again, it's not saying you can't include community, family, or social, whatever you are a part of. It's just, we also have to include us in there. One of the things I said in the previous class is when I talked about balance you. And what I meant by that was, and when I say balance you, is include you during your day. Like, don't forget about you during the entire day. And I tell my clients, I've been telling my clients lately is, I don't care how long your self-care activity is or whatever it is, as long as it's healthy and as long as it's not 0 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. It's just, again, include you during your day. So again, these are, if you have any questions for us, even when you get home and you're like, oh man, I finally have a question, please still send it in to us. Put us in the chat, put it in the chat. Like, that's what we are here for, to help navigate through these community conversations, because that's what we are here for. So that's all that I have. Sal, is there any last words you want to say before I pass it on to Celie?
No, just a great conversation again tonight. Thank you everyone for the engagement. Boundaries, like I said, it's always a different conversation, so it's always interesting to hear and see what everyone has to say. But yeah,
for sure. Yeah, and thank you all again for the engagement. And like I said, we've been running these classes for a while, and it's always a different conversation. So we definitely and appreciate and thank you for the engagement. So that being said, I'm going to pass it on over to Celie so he can close this out.
Yeah, thank you both again. That's always good stuff to think about, right? Last couple of weeks actually have been hitting hard. So the goal is to try to practice some of those principles you guys teach. I mean, it's difficult, but I'm stuck in my ways. But I like the tips, the strategies on how to get better and how to do this better. So thank you so much. We do only have one class left, unfortunately, but cool thing is we're going to run this series again in the fall, so stay tuned for that. But with that, enjoy whatever sun is left out there. Thank you again for hanging out with us this evening. And don't forget, I put the link on the Facebook chat and also on here. Get your, Set Your Brownies t-shirts, really supporting a good cause on mental health. And it's a good reminder, right? So when you're doing that thing you're not supposed to be doing and you look in the mirror, oh man, we ought to be out here setting boundaries. But yeah, so with that, everyone, have a great evening and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Emma.